But now kids don't want to act silly. They don't want to be, essentially they don't want to be kids anymore, because
no matter how bad a kid's addiction might be in terms of phones, there's always a way back from it.
One of the most effective ways that schools implement this that we've seen is that they have their staff on board as well. The teacher at the start of the lesson will put their phone in a pouch in front of the students to say, look, now we're sharing this space together. It's time for learning. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Chris Shrubsole and welcome to School Talk, the podcast where we have meaningful conversations about education, learning, and those issues that matter most to students, to parents, and to teachers. With over 10 years experience in international schools, I've seen firsthand the challenges but also the opportunities in learning today. Each week, I'll sit down with inspiring guests to share stories, insights, and strategies on how we can help shape the future of education. Whether you're here to grow, to learn, or to spark change, this is the place for you. So let's get started.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of School Talk. This week, I'm joined by Daniel from Phone Pouches UAE. So first of all, thank you for coming on the pod.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
And today we're going to talk about your journey, what you do now. So kick us off, Phone Pouches. Talk to us.
Yeah, gladly. So it's just really a bit of a passion project, as well as a business that's seeing exponential growth lately, particularly in the UAE, as we're trying to really tackle that problem that's close to many of our hearts and our parents' hearts. As a parent myself, with kids and screen time, and seeing the impact that that's having on their learning, their social skills, and everything that comes with it. So it really kicked off as a passion project, and we were able to bring over the Fixby brand to the UAE and kick off in September with our first school, one of the gem schools there, to really start having an impact, almost immediately in the schools over there.
Yeah, so the Fixby brand you're working with, what products they offer and how are they helping kids?
So we offer a lot of mobile phone solutions. And that's anything from, workshops to educate parents on digital detoxing. So we work with partners for those. And also just in terms of the main kind of physical solution that people are seeing now, particularly in the UAE, creep up in a lot of schools, is the phone pouches. So this is a physical pouch where it's a fabric material that the kids, they come into school and they unlock the pouch, pop their phone inside, and then lock that pouch. Now that pouch is sealed for the rest of the day. So it's kept with the students, which was quite important. A lot of the research pointed to that separation anxiety when their phones were taken away, which is some of the other policies that schools adopt. So what we found with this is that the kids get to keep their device on them, but it's not accessible. So it's not serving as a distraction during lesson time.
Yeah. And then in terms of the research, what were you seeing in terms of when kids had their phones in these pouches? Increased productivity, more focus? What were you seeing?
Absolutely. So in terms of the research data, there was actually a study in 2015, LSE, and it showed that schools that had mobile phone policies in place that restricted their usage actually saw a 6.4 on average % increase in the grade achievement. So not only is this from a parent safeguarding and well-being point of view a really positive thing, schools are actually seeing that translate into higher grades. So we're really happy with that type of research that's coming out. In the UAE, it's very junior still in this market. So we're still capturing that data, having been live for just over a term now. And we're relying on, the social proof from other regions of the world that have shown that this is a really tried and tested method, which was important to us when you're bringing any new concept into the UAE, particularly into the schools area.
Yeah. And then just what was the motivation behind it? Kind of bringing this to Dubai?
I have kids and they're a bit younger. And so when I look at their future and even now how they almost intuit touching an iPad, a screen, that their world is just going to be very different to what we're into. And so if we can get ahead of that in some way or contribute to a change from the direction that it's going, the direction of travel that it's going with the anxious generation and books like that talk about this, if we can have an impact in that, then, that's paying dividends way into the future and our future and our kids. So I think, it is a passion project of ours that we're working on. And I think that was the real drive behind it, was to make some impactful change. And I think from what we've seen so far, particularly with a film that we did with Mullen Lowe a few weeks ago, we're really seeing that spread at a really alarming rate, actually.
Yeah. Talk to us a bit about that film.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're partnered with great guys over at Mullen Lowe. And the film was the region's longest ever film. So there's 9 hours of content. It's called Don't Look Down. So it premiered at Roxy Cinema in JBR. And the idea behind the concept of the film is to end the scroll. And it put the audience in a position where they were hit with some really hard-facing facts, statistics from around the world about screen time and its usage and the negative impact that it has on teens and students in particular. And then it faced the audience with what was effectively a 9-hour feed of doom scrolling, something that we're all used to doing, but in such a way that we were watching it as almost outside of your body experience, that this is something you do on a regular basis as an adult. We're all guilty of it. And so the audience were then met after a few minutes with a choice. Do they want to end the scroll, or do they want to continue? And it was only after a certain amount of the audience members were able to sign up and say, yes, I want to end the scroll, that we collectively ended that scroll, which led on to a great panel discussion. So in that panel discussion, we had experts from ADEC policymakers, educators, psychiatrists, psychologists, and everyone talking all around that same mission of, what do we do with this scenario that we're facing now?
I was there as well. And for me, the biggest takeaway was that we all need to come together on a very collaborative approach. If we're all doing slightly different things, yes, it will improve, but it won't fix the problem. I think if there's one big collaborative approach that everyone adopts, the pouches or the safes or whatever it is, you'll have a big increase in productivity in schools, and then a decrease in that, as you say, doom scrolling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that came out of the panel. And it's quite a tricky balance. It's not to demonize technology, because there are so many great uses of technology, but it's a case of sort of giving a really powerful tool, but without any, not restrictions, or just boundaries and ways to identify what's proper use, what's misuse, what's going to be helpful, and then what's going to be really generative in the future. So that panel discussion brought together a lot of great minds from the region, and the kind of call to action from that film is Don't Look Down. It's called End the Scroll. And basically they go online to sign up as a petition to say whether we think that this is something that should be looked at on a worldwide basis. And currently there's over 300,000 sign-ups, so the reach has been incredible, and it's really sort of put our trajectory on a very, very steep curve upwards in terms of adoption.
Fantastic initiative, for sure, yeah. So talk to me about, you've got Fixby pouches in schools, and they're helping reduce the amount of screen time in schools. Why do you think they're needed now more than ever, would you say?
I think we see quite a change in the dynamic of schools and what is being a kid. There's a lot of research that sort of suggests that kids aren't being kids anymore, so to speak. So they aren't out playing like, you and I might have done, or being told, come home when the lights come on. The outdoor play element and all of the health benefits that come with that, in the form of vitamin D and so on, that is really generating this. There's a guy who wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, and I think that this is pivotal to where we are now. We come to a point where there's quite a lot going on in the world in terms of conflict, and where our students and, our future generation, young adults, getting their information from. It's from social media most of the time, and a lot of these apps that are not necessarily all the time well restricted in terms of what they're being served. I'm sure we're all familiar with being served something on our feed that we didn't ask for, and suddenly that's now in our brain, and we have to think about that. So I think to protect them now more than ever is very pivotal, particularly with the global tension at the moment.
This will help during the day when kids are at school, but then when kids go home, what's the solution there? Do you think the pouches and the things help set those routines for when they're coming home?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually. We did have a parent. I say parent, it was from a Gmail, it was a little bit suspect, asking if they could purchase one of the unlocking devices for home.
Right, okay.
So, if I'm a smart student, I might be trying to impersonate that, and then, charge my friends 10 dirhams to unlock their pouches and things like that. So we've looked at home, and I think what you don't want to do, and what we're quite conscious of, is to create a scenario where you've got two types of behaviors going on. So behavior in school, and we don't think about phones, we will focus on learning. And then at the end of the school day, what we've seen just by being there, because we're on site with the schools when we launch every day, to make sure that in the morning and the afternoons that everything's flowing normally as it should. And what we're seeing at those points, and particularly in the first 3 or 4 days, I would say, is that the kids are so eager to unlock and get inside those pouches. It's like they're, revealing Willy Wonka's golden ticket, and they've got the best thing ever in their hand. So you're seeing almost early addiction in action, which is really shocking. The best thing about that is that throughout the second week when we're there, you do see that taper off quite quickly. And it's a habit that, you know, as with any habit and any change, it takes a little time to adopt. And once it's there, you know, we were at one of our schools that we launched at yesterday, and the flow is very steady. The kids are doing it almost absent-mindedly now. So I think that in a school system, we've achieved that. We've really helped the schools there. Home is where our next focus is, which is why we've started to work with partners to introduce the workshops. So workshops for parents, students, and teachers to be able to help them on those engagement and touch points, particularly at home when they're coming home and there's a different set of rules and a different infrastructure in a family setting.
Yeah, I think that's really important to have the workshops and the behaviors that can come from school to home, because then you're not, like, again, having a pouch at home. There's no point having a phone, really, is there? You're going to lock them up the whole time. Yeah. Feedback from schools, mainly positive. Have you had some kickback from, like, when a school introduces it and then parents aren't overly keen on it?
I think with every change, you get that initial sort of knee-jerk reaction, particularly if a school wants to roll it out fast. So you don't want to create, you know, the change inertia. So thankfully, we haven't had much kickback at all from parents, because schools have, you know, by design, had a long lead up time to introducing the change. So they're starting with parent communications. You know, this is coming, this is happening. We've done focus groups, and the majority of us thinking from a parent, student, and also teaching staff point of view, this is a positive change that we're doing. This is why we're behind it. Yeah. So I think that in the way that we work with schools, and we provide templates and policies for this as well, is to be able to manage that change well, to increase that amount of acceptance. And at the end of the day, when you look at the why, it's a positive change. Yeah. So even when you get, you know, your toughest of parents, and I think, you know, you would have dealt with that as a teacher as well, that you do have data there behind you, and you do have the fact that it's coming from a good place for the betterment of the child's education. Even just on a fundamental level, if you're a fee-paying parent, you want your kids really learning in that 40 minutes. You don't want them sat looking down a notification on their phone, do you? So there is that investment element from the parent as well.
One of our daughters has them. And when we saw that, we were like, well, she's great on her phone. But then the information coming from their school was like, well, if everybody is that level and isn't on their phone, there's not even a behavior management side to it now, because it's completely gone. So anything time that was spent dealing with phones or people taking photos of each other and circulating that, it's completely gone, which gives even more time to spend on what you should in a classroom.
100%. And that's great to see, because you see it from the three main touch points, right? So parents, when they're asking the kid at the end of the day, you know, what did you do today? They're getting a response. They're not, you know, seeing the top of their heads as they're looking at a phone. Teachers are actually getting a lot more out of their lessons. There's data that came out of the US, and it was anywhere between 20 to 23 minutes it takes for a student to refocus once they've had a distraction from a phone notification. So if you imagine a 40-minute period lesson, that's, you know, 2 times and the whole lesson's gone. So teachers are very happy with that. And then when it comes down to the students, yes, they, you know, you're taking away their freedom as they feel in a sense. But once that they have it in place and all their friends do, that fear of missing out then disappears, because what are they missing out on? There isn't anything that's being organized, you know, in the bathrooms, or there isn't anything happening in the playground that they've communicated through social media on. It's not happening. Everything's happening live in real time and with real conversation. So the feedback from schools has been tremendously sort of uplifting in terms of their community that they have at school now.
And as well, I think going back to my school days, if there was a fight in school, there was an argument, that was left in school. Whereas a few years ago, if there's a fight in school, it's filmed from 50 different angles. And then it's spread around, and people from different schools know about it before the end of the day. Whereas again, going back to those behaviors, that's all gone, because not that the fight's just finished and forgotten about, but there's no one's reminded of it. People can't be targeted at home or things like that. It's all very much, we have a conversation, that conversation's gone. There's no digital footprint of it, which I think is really good for kids to develop socially and just have those conversations, fall out with people, but then make up with them. I think it's all, really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's back to that point, even in the early stages of kids not being kids anymore, you know, sliding on your knees at a disco, things like that, you know, we all probably did. But now kids don't want to act silly. They don't want to be, you know, essentially they don't want to be kids anymore, because their fear of actually this is going to be not in the memories of a few kids for a few years, it's going to be online forever. And so that's a really big issue, and that's a really big deterrent from kids acting out of any way that goes against whatever the mainstream is telling them at the time.
Yeah. So I've got this new app on my computer, which means that I can access my phone from my laptop without actually touching my phone. The dashboard of the phone comes up on my screen and I can do that. So what's to stop kids doing this in schools?
Wow, incredible. So firstly, I'll have to get my hands on this laptop.
Yeah.
Secondly, look, kids, us ourselves or our classmates would, make it our mission to get around things or restrictions as we perceive them that teachers would put in place. So we anticipate that kids are actively working on ways to get around these things. But one of the things that we've done, and benefit of us being on the ground, is that we get a lot of continuous listening. So feedback from the teachers, from the parents, from the students. And one of these things has led to a development of ours, which is actually a Faraday version of the pouch. So Faraday meaning signal blocking. So if the child's phone is inside our new pouch, then there is no more access to things like, smartwatches or this new laptop. That seems to be something of a development.
Yeah.
So these are the things that we're doing. We've got to constantly listen. We anticipate, and we almost encourage, kids to try and stress test the products, because you want to make sure that you're listening to your customer at the end of the day. And if this is something that's going to help schools to enforce the new policies, then we need to be active with that change and get ahead of that curve. So yeah, that's an exciting development from our side, and I'm excited to hear about this laptop that mirrors your phone. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think that's got to be one of the best things about you actually being in Dubai, is that you are on the ground with schools, helping them implement, helping them overcome challenges, things like that. That has to be good feedback from your side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes down to schools wanting to implement, we're able to be on site and give demonstrations very quickly. We can come back, pop back again if they've got a question. And then particularly when it comes to the implementation, we want to make implementation as smooth and as easy for schools as possible, so they can actually focus on the why they're making the change. They're changing the ethos or the way that they handle phone usage in a school, and they want to make it more engaging in the classroom. So our role, I feel anyway, is to be able to enable teachers to do that to the best they can by removing administration, by removing any burden of, time difference with phone calls and things like that. You can give us a call and, we'll be there in a few hours in person. So this is something that's really been well received by the schools.
Yeah, I think the bit there you say about a burden, because there are so many new initiatives coming into school and time is always a big stress in school. I don't have enough time to do what I'm currently expected to do. How am I supposed to do another thing? But making it seamless. And I've seen them work in schools where, as you said, it becomes second nature to kids. It's just, they're expected to do it. Everyone else is doing it. So fine, let's just do it. And it's so seamless, and there's not another thing put on teachers, but it's having such a big benefit to the whole community. Not just kids, not just teachers, but parents, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That, behavior, as we were talking about earlier, the more that we integrate with the policy of the school, the easier it is as change acceptance at home as well. So that behavior that you're doing for 8-9 hours a day at school, it's easier for you to continue with that defined set of rules, habits, and behaviors, and to translate them into home as well. So when the parents are faced with challenges with kids being on the phone or being on screens, what they'll find is that 83% of parents are in support of phone pouches as a solution in the schools, and they're very, very happy with it. We were actually looking at Facebook yesterday. We look at various touch points for feedback, and there was a post in one of the famous groups on Facebook about the UAE saying, my school has introduced this for kids. And there were, within a few hours, 65 comments on that, with, I would say, 9 out of 10, if not 9.5 out of 10 comments saying, this is a great thing. We all survived as kids without phones. This is great. We're bringing back our attention. There were some satire comments in there as well. And, parents saying, I actually spoke to my child at dinner last night for the first time because they'd managed to leave their phone in the pouch and forget that they even had it. So, we're really seeing that positive impact at the schools.
And I think something that was mentioned at that film premiere we went to, no matter how bad a kid's addiction might be in terms of phones, there's always a way back from it. There's always a chance for them to use it less, to interact more, to be more social. So this is definitely a step in the right direction to help in that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's with the development of our workshops and how we go into schools and support them, doing a series of workshops. we touch on digital detox and everything like that. So we have the people, Dr. Alison Burris, for example, who's, very well trained in this area and very, very well researched. It is a great help in really retracing that message from another angle. And when you're talking about behavior change and dynamics there, I think, we're all aware of some of the strategies we can put in place to be able to help with the adoption of the new behavior. And, books like Atomic Habits, for example, is a famous one that really helps with that. So I think in terms of how this is going and the speed at which schools are taking this on, the ways that we can help support and we take the feedback is to really focus on that behavior change part, as well as the physical product being up to scratch to be able to support them with enforcing their policy.
Yeah. So at the moment, you do all this fantastic work with schools. You mentioned there that adults are just as guilty, if not more guilty sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you see this going into workplaces? Do you see maybe not the pouches as such? I think that'd be very hard to enforce. But in terms even just the workshops, the knowledge base of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a complete different vertical where you go into corporates and, hotels, for example, renting out huge conference rooms and these meetings being constantly interrupted. And these corporates are spending a lot of money on these away days. So working with places like hotels to be able to offer as part of their package, your executives are here to learn and to really go through this annual general meeting, for example. And so as part of the package, we give pouches as well to make sure that everyone's in the lesson and everyone's focused.
Yeah.
But I think the more that adults get on board with them, the kids, they emulate the behaviors that they see and they become them. So I think one of the most effective ways that schools implement this that we've seen is that they have their staff on board as well. So we do have another version of the pouch. There's a soft closing, so it's Velcro. This is primarily for diabetic students, for example, but we've seen that schools are adopting them for teachers. So you'll have a moment whereby a teacher at the start of the lesson will put their phone in a pouch in front of the students to say, look, now we're sharing this space together. It's time for learning. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful that when the kids see that change in adults, when your mother, your father's coming home from a long day at work, their head's not, down in their phone. They've been able to start to impact that behavior in the workplace as well. That's something that we will look at as time goes on. But our main focus now, and our work is far from being complete, is to focus on serving schools and the future effectively.
Yeah, I think modeling that behavior is so important. Because I worked at a school where you were expected to check your WhatsApp because that was it's the quickest form of communication.
Yeah.
If someone's not on duty. But at the same time, a kid doesn't know you're checking who's on duty or where someone needs to go to the doctor in class. They just see you on your phone. So if they're looking at you on your phone, they're probably like, well, he's not that engaged in what I'm doing. So it's kind of reciprocated. But I think, modeling that behavior and those routines is really, really important.
Absolutely. That's key, isn't it? You know, teachers, staff can't be seen on corridors. You do have exceptions, obviously, like the DSL of a school who, it's really key that they need them. And we do have and advise schools to place emergency unlockers with certain members of staff or in the clinic room, for example, to be able to handle those cases. But if a teacher's just around the corridor looking at their phone, then, it's an us and them kind of culture, isn't it? It's, we can't be trusted, particularly in sixth form. You see this, where there's a bit of a 50-50 split, I would say, between some schools implementing it across sixth formers and some leaving sixth formers as a privilege, if you like.
Yeah. That
will be quite quickly and swiftly revoked if they don't abide by the privilege of having their phone.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it should be blanket up until they leave school?
Sort of leading on from what we were talking about, it's important to model the behavior.
Yeah.
But also you need to prepare, and this is one of the points that we were talking about as part of the film there, is that you can't demonize the technology. So at the end of the day, it's about responsible and appropriate use. So if a sixth former's in the common room, for example, it would be great if they were interacting, talking with each other, just messing around, doing things that they do on their downtime, as opposed to, having their heads in their phones and circulating messages.
Yeah.
So we would prefer if obviously all students have that, and then the kids in year 7 and 8 who are looking up to the sixth formers, they see that model behavior.
Yeah.
But we also do understand the side of the argument that, hey, these kids are going to university in a few months. They need to be able to demonstrate a bit of control and restraint and practice that in a safe environment here in the school before they're let out into the world, so to speak, at university, for example. And then it's free reign.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely same as you. part of me thinks, yes, you should moderate behavior. Other part of me was like, well, they're 16, 17, 18, some of these kids, and you're still saying they can't go on their phones. So it's a big split. But
yeah, and we lead with the school on that there, because some schools are quite advanced in their mobile phone policy and ethos. Some schools are doing the right thing and they're taking baby steps to get there. So I think it's on a school by school basis. They can emulate and see what's happened at other schools, but it's very important, and this is across corporate as well, not to forget about situation when you're matching a strategy. So, what's going to work at this school who's achieving, 100% A grades and everything like that, and you're a founding school who's got to grow and develop. That's a great strategy, but for their school, you've got to match it to your situation. So we work with in almost a consultative way with schools to say what's going to fit your group of students.
Yeah. So a school is looking to improve their phone use policy and they want to reach out to you. What services do you offer the school? How does that dialogue start? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, since the film in particular and the start of term 2, the news on pouches and how we interact with schools has changed vastly. It started very much focused on what is a pouch? I haven't seen one of these before.
Yeah.
And a good 10-15 minutes of just demonstrating physically with the product. Now we're having inbound traffic and schools coming to us to say, okay, I've seen these at this school or this school. They're having really good success in terms of their safeguarding issues. A number of council appointments being booked has reduced and all of these things.
Yeah.
And we want to attack this. So how do we do this? And 9 times out of 10, there'll be a school who has an out of sight or an off and away policy. And they're not seeing the impact of that. Kids are still sneaking phones in and everything like that. So the way that schools interact with us, it's 9 times out of 10, they want to improve on their existing policy. And the way that they do that is to provide an enabler for the policy, which is the solution like a pouch, for example, and accompanied with workshops for the behavior change piece.
Yeah, love that. So yeah, I'll put all of the information in the show notes as well. So if you do want to reach out, all the information is there as well.
Yeah.
What's next, would you say,
the
journey?
What's next? So along with the Faraday sample, which I think will be, we hope, and I think based on the feedback will be really well received by the schools. We see it just becoming something that schools de facto will have, and it'll become part of the norm. At the moment where it's quite junior in this market in particular, a handful of schools are doing it, and I see that just increasing exponentially, so that when you have kids at one school, their friends have also got pouches at their school, and it becomes part of almost the school uniform.
Yeah.
At the start of the year, you're buying your PE shorts and PE top, but also you're buying a pouch that's, branded with the school logo. So that provides that sense of belonging and an extra ticket there for the schools when they're trying to implement a change.
Yeah. And I think as well, in terms of the cost of it, they're minimal cost, and they will serve your kid as long as that time they're in the school. So there's not going to be that reoccurring price point to it as well.
Absolutely. Well, with my kids, I've actually, gone through about 3 or 4 pairs of shorts with them already.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
In term 2. So, I think that's important to us, as parents ourselves. We don't want to go in from a commercial point of view at a price point that's going to be something that parents have to think about.
Yeah.
You don't want to add even more friction to that change by saying, oh, and it's going to cost you this much. So, I think we're always trying to make sure that we are, putting this as a change agent as opposed to something that's going to make everyone millionaires overnight. It's not that kind of a gig for us. It's very much down the route of make it accessible for all parents across all levels of school. We're all fee-paying parents here. And so we have different sets of fees for different schools. And we want to make sure that even the lower paying fee schools are able to access the same level of product and service that we offer for the premium schools as well.
Yeah.
So we don't differentiate across that.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? Just to know that everyone has that same buy-in, love that.
We're excited to onboard a few more schools over term 3 and the next year for 2025. And I think just reiterating the point that it is a solution to support policy. And our focus has always been supporting the schools, the policy, and implementing the change, as opposed to a focus right on the product. So we're happy to work with schools in a number of ways and solutions. And I think that, in terms of the workshops and schools who are interested in looking at this and they're very early in this stage of it, then feel free to reach out. We're on the ground here. We've been in Dubai personally over 11 years. So we know the lay of the land, how it works. And we're happy to come by for a demonstration and a chat to see how we can help you support with your policy.
Yeah, perfect. Really, really good. I think from me, a parent perspective, only seen it from, I've never worked in a school that have these, but I've only seen it from our daughter. And it's just not an issue. Like, she doesn't talk about someone was on their phone today or someone took a picture of me or anything like that. As I said before, some days she's forgotten about it, hasn't unlocked it after school, and is still locked time she goes to school the next day. And it's just part of it. So I think they're a fantastic product, but away from the product, the service as well.
Absolutely.
Even engaging parents with it and those workshops about why it's happening, what benefits to have is also really, really important. So yeah, fantastic conversation. Daniel, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Yeah. This has been School Talk. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this episode useful or you want to reach out to Daniel, please do so. I think it's a fantastic initiative and it can only help kids and ultimately how they learn. So go for it. My name is Chris Shrubsole. This has been School Talk. Bye for now.